Hey there drone fans, Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to show you 3 of my favorite drones that you can buy today for less than $100. Now I know there's a ton of drones on the market, and I'm sure I'm going to get comments below from some of you saying, hey, why'd you pick that drone? This other drone is cooler. I totally get it. Everybody's got favorite drones. If you're flying something you like and you're having fun with it, stick with it. But the challenge is that the market's exploding. It seems like every week 25 new drones come out, and I look at a lot of them, and I fly a lot of them, but you'll find if you look really close that a lot of them are very, very similar. They're clones of each other. Maybe the body's a little different, the color's different, the model number, the manufacturer, but under the hood, they're basically the same drone, so that's not interesting to me. The reason I settled on these 3 is, number 1, I've been flying them since the day of release. The minute I heard about all 3 of these, I bought it, took it home, been flying it ever since. So I've got some experience with it. The second reason is I feel that all 3 of these, for different reasons, build in sophistication you don't normally find in a drone under $100. And I'll get into those details sort of at the end. So the 3 drones I'm talking about are the Rise Tello, the Zowie B2, and the Parrot Mambo. And each of them are great drones to fly. So when people ask me, we're getting into the hobby, we're thinking of buying a drone, we wanted to start with something small, I'll recommend any one of these 3, and you can't go wrong with them because they really do build in features you don't normally find in that sub $100 drone into a drone that's less than $100. So they're great values. The other thing I'll do is start off with sort of comparing the 3 with common features, because there are things you're going to want in a drone for less than $100 that not all the drones have in there. And if you don't realize what you're looking for, you'll buy a drone that looks really cool, because a lot of those drones have really splashy advertisements. Then you get it home and it's not quite as cool as it looks like in the video. But there's certain things you want in a drone for less than $100, and I'll explain those now. Then I'll go outside and I'll actually fly all 3 of them so you can see how they handle. Then I'll come back at the end and do sort of a pros and cons list between the 3 to compare them, so you can figure out which of the 3 might be right for you, because all of them are slightly different, do different things, but they're all great for different purposes. So that way you'll get a feel for which of the 3 might make sense for your budget and your needs. So let's get started with the review of the common features between them. So any drone I'm looking for has to have a couple of things built in. Number 1, I want to try and get as long a flight time as I can. Now all 3 of these drones are about a 10-minute flight time. Some of the smaller drones, you're going to get 3 or 4 minutes, and honestly, if they don't have the level of sophistication these do for stabilization, you're going to spend a minute or 2 just correcting for drift. Whereas these, when they launch, they're rock solid in the air. So as long as there's no big wind or you're not flying outside with a big wind, you're going to put them up and immediately start flying. A lot of the less expensive drones, you're going to fiddle with them an awful lot to correct for drifting or rising or falling. So a 10-minute flight time is important to me. All 3 of these have about a 10-minute flight time, a little longer on some, a little shorter on others, but I like the fact that I can get pretty good flights out of them. They also have really quick recharge times. I don't want to spend 2 hours recharging a battery, so the charge times on these vary from 30 minutes to about an hour to charge the batteries, and that's perfectly acceptable for me. Another thing I want is I want to have a standardized charger. I don't want to deal with any kind of custom charger. A lot of the less expensive drones have a charger that only works with that drone, and I promise you, 2 weeks after you get the drone, you're going to put the charger in a drawer someplace. You're not going to be able to find it, and then you've got a drone you can't fly. All 3 of these charge over a micro USB cable. Use any charger you've got. You can charge them from your computer. It's just an easier way to go where you don't have to worry about a specialized cable or specialized charger, and you can charge them pretty quickly. Also, there are third-party hubs out there that'll allow you to charge multiple batteries at the same time for all 3 of these drones. That's something you may want to consider if you fly a lot. Like if I'm on a Saturday afternoon when it's raining and I don't want to fly for an hour, I'm going to get 10 minutes out of the battery. So I want to have 3 or 4 batteries, and that's an accessory you can pick up. But I don't want to have to sort of slide them through the drone to charge them. I want to put them in a hub and charge them all at the same time. So all 3 of these have hubs available in the market where you can charge multiple drones, which is really nice. All 3 will support a remote controller. Some of the less expensive drones won't, or they've got some kind of wonky wand or something you're flying it with. You're going to want drones that can support a game controller, so you've got real joysticks under your thumbs, because even though you can fly these very easily with a application on your phone, you've got virtual joysticks. It's not the same experience. So if you're trying, like I do, to keep your stick skills sharp, so on a rainy Saturday or during the winter, I'm flying these guys in the house like crazy. I want to have a regular joystick under my thumbs to make sure that I've still got that tactile feedback of that controller to keep my stick skills sharp. So that's something you want to consider. And again, all 3 of these will support that. I like the fact that I've got a removable battery. Some of the newer drones that are really inexpensive have an internal battery. That's a pain because I can charge it once, I fly it, I got to charge it again. So these are all easy to remove. They're custom batteries, but that's not a big deal for me because you can get the extra batteries on the market, but they're removable batteries. They go in really easy, and it's a really good secure connection. The last thing I'll talk about are these prop guards, because if you're flying it in the house, you're going to want to have prop guards on it. And I know people are looking at that going, aren't those really like training wheels? okay, they kind of are, but they're going to save you. Trust me when I tell you, they're going to save you from a lot of debates in the house, especially if you're married and you run one of these things into a lamp and knock it over. So having prop guards on it not only protects the drone, it protects your property, it protects your kids, your dog, everybody else. So the prop guards are on. They come off if you're going to fly it outside, especially if there's any kind of wind. I'd recommend taking the prop guards off, because this thing looks like a sail or a kite when it's out in the wind, and these prop guards tend to gather the wind, and it'll be a little bit more all over the place, I guess, with the prop guards on. So those are some common features I'm looking for. Now, if you look at a lot of the drones on the market, you can take those 5 or 6 things I just mentioned and check them off as like, nope, it's not worth it. Even though it's a much less expensive drone, you're thinking, it's a good bargain. If it doesn't have one of those 5 features, I'd stay away from it. All 3 of these have those features built in. So that's pretty much it for this section. Now I'm going to go outside, I'm going to fly them. You'll get a chance to see them actually up in the air and see how they handle. And then I'll come back and do some pros and cons between them, because I like all 3. And as I said before, I don't really have a favorite. I mean, if you pressed me, maybe that's my favorite of the 3. But if they're all different for different reasons, that they're like my children. I like them all the same. And they're all special in their own way. Let me leave it at that. So stay tuned and we'll head outside and fly a little bit. Here's the Parrot Mambo. Now I wanted to point out before I actually launch it that of the 3 quads, this is the only one that uses Bluetooth for a connection between the quad and your phone. And that is a little bit of a slower connection, so you'll notice it's not quite as responsive when you're moving the joysticks. It takes a quarter of a second, I guess, for it to respond to your joystick movements, but it's still perfectly fine. And I actually think that's an advantage, because being a little bit slower to respond means that you can sort of make a couple of mistakes and kind of correct for them. You can get out of trouble a little bit easier because it's not immediately flying in the direction you point it. All right, let me launch it. Hit the takeoff button. Now again, there's no warning. It just pops up to 3 feet. But look how stable that is in the air and how quick it moves around. So it is responsive. It's just takes a little bit getting used to. If you're flying with the other quads, they tend to be a little bit more responsive than this guy. But again, perfectly fine. And Bluetooth will take you, 50 meters, 100 meters out. And if you're flying outside, you don't want to go much further than that anyway, because it gets 50 meters away from you and the wind kicks up. You're going to be chasing this thing around the neighborhood. All right, so let me show you a couple of tricks on this guy. I'll do a flip here, flip forward. Kind of nice. And you'll notice that it elevates up just enough so when it does the flip, it ends up pretty much where it was. And that's important, because if you're too close to the ground and it tries to do a flip, it'll crash into the ground. So I like that it jumps up a little bit, does the flip, and then readjusts. And that's super important in the house. If you're flying this thing and want to do flips in the house, make sure you've got enough room between it and the ceiling. Now, again, it's not a piloting skill to flip this thing, but if you've got friends that you want to show off your quad to, or if you've got little kids, they just love watching this thing flip. All right, here's a back flip. Nice. Right flip. And a left flip. All right, pretty cool. All right, so let me bring her in a little closer and give you a look at it. So I'll walk over to it. So that's a Parrot Mambo right there, and it's really stable. I mean, it's got that sonar on the bottom that's sort of looking at the ground and making adjustments to keep it in place, but it's not moving around a whole lot, and there is a bit of a wind out here today, so that's pretty impressive. All right, let's see how close I can get to the landing here, because it doesn't give you a lot of time on the way down. It's going to definitely come down pretty quickly when I hit that landing button, so I think we're pretty close. I'll try and make a minor adjustment on the way down. Whoa, that was pretty close. I almost nailed that. I think the wind caught me there at the end. Let's just blame it on that. But anyway, that's your Parrot Mambo. Here's the Zowie B2. Now I'll hit the launch button. And the first thing it does is pop up a screen that warns me. It says it's going to take off immediately. Make sure that you've got people away from that and it's nowhere near obstacles, and it's going to elevate to an altitude of 1 meter. Are you sure you want to take off? Yes, I do. And man, they're not kidding. That thing just rockets right up to about 3 feet. Drifted a little to the left there, but I'm going to blame that on the wind. But look how responsive this guy is. And again, it's a Wi-Fi connection, so you'd expect that. And I've got it on the middle setting as far as speed goes, but really responsive. Very, very fast. Whole lot of fun to fly this guy. All right, so let me do a couple of tricks while I've got it out there. Let's do a couple of flips here. Let's see. Let's start with a back flip. That's kind of cool. And you notice how it elevates and then eventually ends up about the same altitude. Here's a right... Actually, uh-oh. Okay, I'll be careful. Now we'll take a left flip. Nope. There we go. Okay, so the battery's getting kind of low. Let me just bring it in real close so we can get a good look at it. All right, so there it is. There's the B2. And again, very stable in flight, very fast, extremely responsive. And it looks like it's wanting to land on its own. So let me try and land this guy right now. I've got it right over the mat. I'll hit the land button. It's saying, are you sure you want to land? Yes, I definitely want to land. Boom, comes right down. So that's your Zowie B2, and I think it's a great quad to fly, and it's one of my favorite ones to fly outside because of its speed. Let's take a look at the Rise Tello. Now, one thing I want to mention about this quad before I actually launch it is when I hit the launch button on the Tello, you'll notice it'll sit on the landing pad for a couple of seconds, spin up its motors, kind of get its bearings, and then it'll launch and ascend to 4 feet. The other two quads, when you hit that launch button, tend to rocket right up to the 3-foot level and try to fix their position from that height. The challenge there is if the wind's blowing at all, they may drift a little bit, and it takes them a while to settle in. So I like the fact that the Tello thinks about it before it actually launches. Let me hit the launch button. There's a slide to confirm that. Yes, I definitely want to launch. See the motor spin up? Then it takes off. Now the wind caught it a little bit on the way up, so it did slide a little to the left there, but again, very stable quad. Let me drop her down a little bit so you can see it a little better. I'll fly it out. Very nice control, very smooth in the air. I've got it on one of the lowest settings as far as speed, just so I can capture it on film here. But I love the way this handles. I mean, it's very graceful in the air. You bring it in a little closer so we can get a good look at it. All right, so there's the Rise Tello. And again, I'm not touching the joysticks at all at this point. The wind is bouncing it a little bit. You can see it's making minor adjustments, but it's almost like it's hanging from a string there. I mean, I'm not doing anything to adjust it, and it's rock solid positioned in 3D space, so that's fantastic. The other thing that may be just my ears, but it sounds like it's a little bit quieter than the other two quads, and that's not a big deal if you're outside flying, but if you're inside on a rainy Saturday afternoon and you've got family members in the house, trust me, they're going to love the fact that it's a little bit quieter than the other quads. All right, so let's fly it back out a little bit. You can get a lot of height out of it as well. The last thing I want to point out is in the landing. It's got kind of a unique landing, so let me get it over the mat a little bit. That's pretty close. Now, when I hit the land button on this one, unlike the other two quads that'll kind of drop out of the air like a rock, this one actually descends very slowly, so watch this. See how it's coming down nice and slow? So it gives me a chance to make tiny little minor adjustments if I need to land that thing as close as possible to the center of the mat. I like that a lot, again, because if the wind's blowing and you've got a mat on the ground and you've got wet grass all around it, you're trying your darndest to land back on that mat, and being able to adjust it on the way down is a big plus. Now that you've seen all the quads in the air, I thought I'd take a minute with each of them and explain their good points and maybe their not so good points, so you understand the differences between them, and that way you can make a decision on which one's right for you. And we'll start with the Parrot Mambo. Now, this is hands down my favorite quad to fly in the house for a couple of different reasons, and I'll explain that in a minute. But I thought I'd start off with the pros and cons list, and we'll start with the cons, and then I'll build it up with the pros at the end. So one of the cons of the Mambo is that its connection topology is Bluetooth, whereas the other two quads use Wi-Fi, and that may not seem like such a big deal, but Bluetooth as a standard can't push as much data as quickly as Wi-Fi can, which means when you move the joysticks, whether it's virtual or on the controller, it takes a second for the quad to react. It's a little bit slower, but that makes it a little bit more elegant in the air, and for me that could be an advantage because with the other two quads, when you move a joystick, the quad reacts immediately, and if you're just learning how to fly, and you're panicking because the quad is heading for a lamp, it's nice to have a couple extra seconds to pull it back. So I like the fact that it's got a bit of a lag in it, but that may be a problem for you. Where it really turns into an issue is if you decide you want to fly this between rooms in the house, because Bluetooth doesn't really do well through walls, whereas Wi-Fi can pretty much handle a wall. So if you're going to fly this thing from the den through the hallway out to the kitchen, it's going to be an issue where it's going to be slow. The second problem, though, is that it's got no internal camera. So you can't really fly it between rooms because you can't see what's in front of you. So that may be an issue for you because the other two have 720p cameras in there where you can go outside and record video, you can take pictures. So if you're into that kind of thing, those two quads will probably fit your needs better. But I will tell you there are some major advantages to this that make it a really cool quad, in addition to the fact that it's just such a smooth quad to fly indoors. The first one is it's extensible. And what I mean by that is on the top of the quad, you'll notice these connectors right here. They look like Lego blocks up there. Those connectors allow you to attach things to the quad. So you've got this flying robot that can do other things besides just flying. The other two quads are great quads, but they're just going to fly around and take pictures. This one you can do other cool things. So for example, you can buy this in a couple of different configurations, but the configuration I bought comes with a tiny little miniature cannon that sits on the top of this that fires little foam balls out of it. So you can fly this thing over to the other side of the room. And if you're having a boring Saturday, there's nothing more fun than flying this over to the kitchen table and start beating somebody with those foam balls. So that's one thing it does. It also comes with a gripper assembly that fits on the bottom, and that attaches to the quad. So you can actually fly it over something if it's light enough. You can't pick a brick up with it, but if it's light enough, you could fly it over something, close those clampers, and then fly off with the thing. That's pretty cool. So I like those two features. The other thing is you can add a camera to it. So one of the extensions is a camera that pops on top, connects in, and you've got a camera. So you can kind of make up for what this one can't do that the others can do by adding those attachments. But I love those little gadgets that fit on there because it just turns it into just a cooler quad in general. So that's the Mambo. The other major advantage of this over the other two is the price. It's around 40 bucks. Now the price on these bounce around all the time. There's always sales going on or whatever. I'll put links below where you can find them. But I like the fact that it's probably half the price on average than the other two quads. So if you're looking for something that's easy to fly, inexpensive, and has a bunch of cool stuff you can add to it, this is the guy to go with. So that's the Parrot Mambo. Now we'll take a look at the Zowie B2. And if I had to describe what I like about this quad versus the other two in a single word, it would be fast, because this thing is a speed demon. You get it outside, tag that throttle, and it just disappears. And that's unusual for a quad in this price range. Normally they fly really fast, but this one's like it's been hot wired or something. It's just way faster than the other two quads. Now I haven't done a drag race yet between it and the Rise Tello, but honestly, if we're racing for pink slips, my money's on this guy. And that's a good and a bad thing, because if you're outside, it's fun to fly fast. But if you're inside and you're not that good yet on it, it really could take a lamp out, because it's really kind of reckless how fast it can fly. And you can dial back the speed, but I like flying fast. It's also good because it means it's incredibly responsive. If I tickle those joysticks, it does exactly what I want it to do almost instantaneously. So if I'm getting into trouble outside, I'm getting too close to a tree or a bush or something, I can pull back instantly because it reacts just that quickly. So I like the fact that it's really fast. So now we'll talk about pros and cons, and I'll start with the cons. So the first thing you're going to notice when you're flying this is that it doesn't have image stabilization. So if you're up in the air and you're recording video footage and the quad's getting buffeted by the wind, your video footage is going to mimic that buffeting, so it's going to move all around. There's no electronic image stabilization at all. But let's be fair. You're not buying a $100 quad to videotape your cousin Clementine's wedding. It's not the quad you're going to use for that. You're going to step up to something that's got a stabilized gimbal or some kind of electronic image stabilization. So it does a good job for what you're buying. And it does okay on video. It's going to have a little shake to it. The pictures are great, so just know that when you're buying it. The second thing, and maybe it's just me, is that I find because of the battery design, it's kind of unique. It's on the top and it's circular. It gets hot. And if you're flying in the summertime, that could be an issue for you, because that means you're going to get less flight time out of the quad. If you're flying it indoors, you're flying it in cooler weather, you're not going to have an issue, but it does get warmer, which does cut back on the flight time a little bit. The third thing, which is kind of a minor point, it's the one quad that isn't really built by a drone company. So both Parrot and Rise, which has got, and I'll talk about it in a minute, it's got some DJI technology in it, are kind of drone companies, so they know what they're doing. This is one of the first ones that Xiaomi's put in the market, but they're gigantic electronics companies, so they understand this kind of stuff, so I wouldn't let that worry me, but I just wanted to point that out. All right, so let's talk about the good stuff. So for starters, the unit itself is built to be incredibly stable, and it's adopted some technology from higher quality drones. So you've got two things on the bottom of it. You've got a sonar right here, which allows it to know exactly, because it's bouncing sonar waves off the ground, to know exactly what its height is. Now, if you go too high, it's not going to work well, but if you keep it under 10 feet, it's going to really kind of keep it stable in a vertical position like this. So you're not going to have it floating all over the place trying to make adjustments. The second thing it's got, which is incredible, is it's got what's called optical flow sensors on the bottom. Now, those are a technology that, I won't go too much into detail on this, but you find it in a lot of the more sophisticated drones. Essentially, there's a camera pointing straight down that's looking at the ground. And what it's trying to do is to maintain its position looking at exactly that same spot. So the higher you go, the less effective it is. But again, if you're under 10 feet, which is where you're probably flying, it's going to look at that image below it and maintain its horizontal position to keep that image directly below it. So you've got vertical positioning with the sonar and horizontal positioning with the optical flow sensor. So it's a very sophisticated setup, which is kind of cool, which means you're going to have a very, very stable quad. The next thing that's nice about it is it's programmable. So if you're a nerd like me and you want to start writing programs that say turn on, lift off, fly 10 feet, and then land, you can do that. So that's kind of cool that you can build programs for it later on and really have a lot more fun with it than just flying it from a controller. The last thing I'll talk about, and I haven't done this yet, but there's actually an infrared sensor below the camera on the front. And I was wondering what that was for, and I've read through the manuals and stuff, but they talk about battle mode, which is something I haven't experimented with. I only own one of these, but I'm going to get a second one and we'll see if we can hook it up. But battle mode has to do with the infrared sensors, like blasting each other with infrared light, I guess, to let you know, like, you've taken points or you've taken a guy out. I don't understand it, but the fact that that feature is built into it is something I'm definitely going to explore. So that's kind of a nice feature as well. But overall, the other nice thing about it is the price. It's right between the Parrot Mambo and the Rise Tello. It runs about a $60 price range. And again, these prices bounce all over based on sales and availability. But right now, when I'm recording this clip, it's about a $65, $64 investment, which puts it right in that sort of perfect zone between not too cheap and not too expensive in that $100 band. So that's another advantage to it. But I like it a lot. And again, it's a whole lot of fun to fly fast outside with this guy. Last but not least is the Rise Tello. And if I were to introduce this drone to other drones at one of those fancy dinner parties, the word I'd use to describe them would be brilliant, because it's got so much technology packed into that tiny little frame. It still blows my mind. The first time I saw this drone was at CES 2018, and I spent well over an hour in their booth quizzing their engineers on every aspect of the quad. And I don't know how they're selling it as cheap as they are. This drone should cost $150 or $200, and it would still be well worth the money. It really is just that smart. Now, I'll get into some of that in a minute, but it is hands down my favorite drone to fly. So when I'm flying in the house, I probably got my fingers on the stick of this one more than the other two. Now, I love the other two drones. I mean, this one doesn't shoot little rubber balls out of a cannon, and it really doesn't fly as fast as maybe the B2, but overall, the stability of this, the control, the smoothness of flight, it just makes it easy to fly. And when people ask me that are getting into drones which one they should start with, more often than not, I'm recommending this guy. So let's talk about the pros and cons. Now, the only con I could find on this, from my perspective, would be the price. It's the most expensive of all three. It comes in just under the $100 mark. But honestly, the prices bounce around so much. I mean, over the holidays, I think it was down to $79. You can find it all over the web, but it's a drone that's absolutely worth its money. So I wouldn't worry about it. If you can find a deal, that's great. Sometimes you can find a package where you get this and extra batteries, and it works out to be a better price. But don't think twice about it. If you're looking for a quad, this is definitely one that you're going to be happy with buying. Now, the pros are numerous, so I'll start talking about those. The first thing has to do with the image stabilization. I mentioned before the Me 2 didn't have any. This has got electronic image stabilization. Now, I've seen entire YouTube channels that are based on videos that were shot with this product. It's that good in the air. I mean, it's going to capture some great footage for you. Really good for the pictures as well. So if you're out there and you want to capture some of those shots with your friends and selfies and all that kind of stuff, this guy's going to do the job. It also is incredibly stable in the air, and that's because of the two sensors on the bottom. You've got, for starters, infrared sensors as opposed to a sonic type sensor on the bottom. You've got infrareds, which means it's going to help it fix its position vertically in 3D space. So the reason that's important is because the IR is a little bit more accurate, especially indoors, than the sonic sensors would be. And bringing it inside and flying it outside, you want to have the same experience. This thing is incredibly stable. So if you're flying it in the house, it's not the one you're going to knock a lamp over with. You're going to have a lot of control. And what's nice about it is it's not going to fluctuate vertically. So when you get it outside and the wind starts kicking up, it's going to make adjustments to keep itself stuck in position. It also has optical flow sensors, like I mentioned before, and that's for the horizontal control. Because again, if you're in the house, you don't want this thing drifting on its own, banging into stuff. Whereas the others drift a tiny bit, this one doesn't drift at all. So when you put this thing up, it'll immediately rise to the position you put it at, and it's going to stay there. It's like it's stuck in 3D space, and that's perfect in the house and outside. And even in a stiff wind, it's going to make adjustments to not only keep it exactly where it is, again, vertically and horizontally, but it's also not going to tilt too much. It's going to fight the wind, but it's going to keep its position. So it's a really easy quad to fly, especially if you're starting out. It's the one you want to play with. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's programmable. So if you're somebody like me who's a nerd, I love flying quads, but if I can put a program together, it uses Scratch, which is a really common programming language. You can build a program out of blocks, you drop them down, and it does a bunch of things. But if I can have a quad, spin up, take off, fly over here, land on a coffee table, that's just too cool. So as a nerd, I love the fact that I can program it. And if you have kids that are interested in science or electronics or robotics, or they're in the STEAM program, this is the guy to own, because as a dad, I can take my daughter, my son, and say, look, this is kind of fun to fly, but let's write a program to do it. They light up. I mean, that's something that's definitely cool. And you can do it with the Me 2 as well, but I like the fact that I can use Scratch because that's one of the ones they're using at school. So that's pretty cool. The other thing I'll talk about is its pedigree, because the parents of this product are giants in the space. You've got DJI for control and telemetry information, and they're a monster in the drone space. You've also got Intel for stabilization and controls and some video enhancing imagery to help that stabilization on the video. And they're a monster in the technology space. So you've got the Einstein of drones with two parents that are brilliant, sort of diving technology into this. And again, for them to think that this was an important enough product to devote technology to it tells me everything I need to know about it. So at a $99 price point, I'd have paid $150 for this and wouldn't have thought twice about it based on the functionality of it. So if you're looking for one of the three that I'd recommend as a good starter drone, it'd be the Rise Tello. The other two are fantastic. They're all under $100. If you got 50 bucks to spend, go with the Mambo. If you got 70 bucks to spend, go with the Me Too. But if you can go for the full $100, this is probably the one you want to own, but all three of these are going to be fun to fly. So that's pretty much it for today. Hopefully you found this review helpful. And again, if you guys have enough interest in this, I'll do deep reviews on all three of these products. I am going to start reviewing a lot less expensive drones. I know I focus a lot on sort of the mid-tier and the high-end drones, but I've had a lot of requests from you guys to review drones that are less than $200, less than $500. So expect a series of clips coming from the channel talking about those drones and those different price points. I just love flying and I love talking about technology. So as long as you guys are enjoying these clips, I'll keep making them. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button down there, because that way you won't miss a clip that we're posting. And it also helps the channel get the attention of a lot of different drone companies that may want to send us product to test. So saves me a few bucks by going that route. But anyway, that's pretty much it for today. Thanks an awful lot for watching. And until next time, happy flying.